14th, Thursday edition of studentloanjustice.org. We are the oldest, largest, first, and only true actual grassroots group fighting only and absolutely for student loan justice. Despite our admittedly lowbrow appearance, we're actually the largest group out there. We've got 1.4 million members across all of our platforms. And I can only hope that if you forget everything I'm about to say tonight, remember at least to go to our website and get into the habit of doing our daily actions. They are quick, they work. And when 1.4 million people do them every day, we will have the student loan problem solved in a matter of weeks. That's true. So you came to the right place. Tell everyone you know about this group. A couple of quick announcements. We've got a couple of interview requests from national and international media right now. If you find us on Facebook, just Google Student Loan Justice and Facebook, and you can find us. You can see those interview requests. You can also go to our petition at change.org/cancel student loans and look at our most recent update to see those interview requests. We're going to be doing some very combative interviews here coming up, and I'll have more to say about that soon. But I'm pretty sure we're going to have a relatively big one coming out on Monday, so that'll be interesting. We're fighting for two things, ladies and gentlemen. We're fighting for the return. Look at that kitty. I got some kitties up for adoption, by the way, if you happen to be in the northern Wisconsin area. So we're fighting for two things. We're fighting for the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans. That lies at the core of the whole entire issue. Nobody wants to file for bankruptcy, guys. Everybody, I think, wants their loans canceled. Well, I'm here to tell you that we're not going to see that second thing until we get that first thing back. We have got to get the leverage of bankruptcy rights back on our side if we are ever going to see anything good happen with this nightmare of a student loan program. We've been doing this since March 2005, guys. That's 18 years, over 18 years now, 18 and a half years. And let me tell you, that's the truest thing I will say tonight, and the most significant and important point that I will make tonight. We've got to get the leverage of bankruptcy returned to student loans if we're going to see any kind of loan cancellation that's meaningful. The stuff that Biden did, Department of Education did, that we're hearing about now, the 800,000 borrowers, that is nothing, guys. That's fewer than 2% of all borrowers. And Joe Biden could cancel $116 billion in student loan debt every 2.5 years like he's been doing. And the student loan portfolio would still grow by $1.5 trillion. More than that, actually, every 10 years. More than that, by the way. I'm not counting a lot of capitalized interest that would in reality be baked into that number. It's probably closer to $2 trillion over 10 years. So guys, what we've seen is no solution. What we need is the real solution. The real solution begins with us getting our bankruptcy rights returned to the loans. Please don't forget that. Whether you would ever or never file for bankruptcy is not important. Very few people, perhaps no one, will actually have to file for bankruptcy. We've just got to get the right return, and that lies at the core of everything. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we are the only group in the country that realizes this, apparently. The other groups claiming to be fighting for student loan borrowers are completely and utterly full of shit. Sorry to say that. Debt Collective and Student Debt Crisis, and what are the other groups? The Young Invincibles and these just Student Borrower Protection Center. They're all just completely full of nonsense. None of those groups are fighting for bankruptcy, and quite frankly, over half of those groups are straight up corrupted. And I may actually do a podcast about that at some point, because I think it's important for people to know the truth about what's really going on with these other groups. It's disgusting. But I digress. Tonight, I want to talk about an article that we just published last night, and I'm going to share my screen for you real quick so you can see it. The title of the article is, there it is, the federal student loan program is no longer viable. What to do about it? And I'm going to take you through that quickly, and you can see for yourself why the first part is true and what the second part is. Here's the article. Hopefully you can still see it on our Medium channel. Yep, there it is right there. Oh, maybe it's not. Hold on. Let us go to the Medium article. Okay, good. Here we are. So first of all, is the federal student loan program really not viable? Is it really that far gone? Yes, it is. And here, I'll prove it to you in the next, hopefully, 1 minute. So in 2019, Secretary DeVos, who's terrible, by the way, even she acknowledged that 75% of all federal student loan borrowers were underwater on their loans. Underwater. So over half of them were not paying at all. And another 25% of them were paying and paying and paying, but their loan balance was going up. Well, a Trump appointee, her federal student aid chief, Wayne Johnson, later acknowledged that the true number was closer to 85%. He said it was actually over 85%. And quite frankly, I trust him a little more than I trust her. 85% of all borrowers never going to be able to repay their loans. They were saying that before the pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. What is that? When 85% of the people aren't going to or will never be able to repay their loans. That's a failed lending program. And here you can see, here are the actual repayment rates. Before the pandemic, 58.9%. That's the red and the orange that you see there. That's the not payers and the people who were technically in repayment, but were making $0 payments on their IDRs. That's another 8% or so. So we're talking about nearly 60%. So nearly 3 in 5 of all federal student loan borrowers were not making payments on their loans before the pandemic. That's a failed lending system, guys. Here's another thing that nobody knows this, but it's true. There are more older people out there in the country today than younger people with student loans. Older, I mean over the age of 35. Younger, I mean under the age of 35. More people over the age of 35 with federal student loans than under the age of 35. There are more people over the age of 50 with student loans than under the age of 25. And in both of those cases, the older group, the over 35s, the over 50s, they owe somewhere between 150 and 300% in the 50 versus over 50 versus under 25 group. 300% more than the younger group. I hope I said that clearly. The older crowd owes on average far more. Their loan balances are far higher than the younger crowd. And this is despite these older people typically having borrowed far, far, far less and many, many, many years ago. Think about that. When you get a loan over time, your balance is supposed to go down as you pay it off, not up. And it should certainly do that for the large majority of all borrowers if that lending system is viable. It's not happening for student loans. So the lending system clearly is not viable. Here's another jaw dropper that you will never see reported in the public media. Well, it got reported one time by Business Insider, but the mainstream media is not our friend, guys. They do not like to report the truth. We got maybe a little bit lucky with Business Insider, but over a third of U.S. states, student loan debt in those states, it exceeds the entire state budget of those states. So you can see the map here. You can see the South is being hit particularly hard. There's kind of a cluster there, including Florida, North South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, etc. Imagine that, look at the state of Florida. People of Florida owe $120 billion in mostly federal student loan debt. That is equivalent to something like over 12 years of the annual revenues, closer to 20 years of the annual revenue of Disney World, which is by far the largest employer in the state of Florida. Georgia is even worse. If you compare the amount of student loan debt, $81 billion in the state of Georgia. If you compare that to the size of their state budget, $48 billion state budget for the state of Georgia. And I mean, what are we doing here, guys? What are we talking about? We're talking about a failed lending program. Here's maybe the last one and there's more that I could trot out, but here's another one that really shows clearly how badly the southern states are being affected. If you look at the average student loan debt versus the average earnings in the various states, you find that this is not a coastal elitist, coastal elite problem. This is not a San Francisco, Boston, Massachusetts, Seattle, Washington issue. In fact, the states that are doing the best by that metric are these liberal coastal elite states. And there you can see the map speaks for itself. The worst hit states are like Mississippi, and again, Florida is terrible. North South Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, you name it. So, okay, no, I'm gonna do one more because it's killer. This is a killer, guys. This is, again, almost never been reported. The default rate for people who left college in 2004 is 40%. That's twice higher than the subprime home mortgage default rate. The subprime home mortgage default rate was about 20%. The default rate for student loans for people who left college in 2004 is 40%. It's probably a little higher than that, actually. But the people who left college in 2004, they were borrowing on average not much at all, something like $13 or $14, maybe $15,000. Today, the average undergraduate, and we're talking about undergrads here, the average undergraduate borrower is leaving college with something like $40,000 in student loan debt. So if the default rate for 2004 students is 40%, what do you think it will wind up being for people who went to college after that? In other words, for all the people walking around right now with student loan debt, it's going to be way higher than 40%, guys. It's going to be way higher than 50%. And now that we're finally coming off of this repayment pause where we've had 3.5 years of no pain, the economy hasn't gotten great. Inflation has sucked up every nickel that we were saving during that pause. That default rate could go to 75, 80% easily. So the federal student loan program, ladies and gentlemen, the federal student loan program is done. It's finished by all rational metrics. You will not hear that in the media. The mainstream media has no courage, no spine, they just apparently don't have the freedom to look at the facts, report the facts, and draw the only possible conclusion that a rational person can draw from looking at the facts, like those 5 things that I just laid out. I could probably find 5 other facts that would clearly demonstrate that the federal student loan program is done, guys. It's done. It's finished. And as a segue to what we should do about it, let me just tell you, the reason it's finished is because people got cute. People got clever in Washington, D.C. many years ago. And they decided that they would weaponize these loans and turn them into licenses to steal from the people. They took away constitutional bankruptcy rights from the loans. They took away statutes of limitations. They took away fair debt collection practice laws. They took away truth in lending laws. Even state usury laws have no bearing on federal student loans. So these loans were turned against the people. And the intended or unintended consequences, I don't know, was massive inflation in the price of college, massive increase in the amount being borrowed. And here we are at the end of that rope. The lending system is done because the loans were turned against the citizens, turned predatory. Good faith was legislated out of the loans. So we do not have to put up with this bullshit, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to save my warrior words for later, or maybe another podcast altogether. For now, I just want to take you through what must happen to fix this program. And when I say fix, I actually don't mean fix, guys. I mean end and replace. The student loan program nobody should even try to fix this lending program. It is over the cliff. It has outlived its usefulness. There is no fixing this fiasco. It can't be done. Here is what must happen going forward. And believe me, guys, I've been thinking about this very deeply, very, very thoroughly, going through all the different possibilities, all the different outcomes. I've been gaming this out for many, many, many years. And here is what has to happen. Let me just scroll up to it. Sorry about that. Okay. What should really happen? The president, whether it's this president or the next, the president needs to immediately suspend the federal student loan program. No more loans going forward. Suspend the lending program. They're going to have to put the colleges on some sort of a direct funding plan for a year or two. So instead of giving them $100 billion a year in federal student loan money, they should give them, I don't know, $75, $80 billion in direct, call it a grant, call it free money, whatever you want. You got to put the colleges on a temporary hiatus direct funding plan. And during this hiatus, this 1 to 2 years, the Department of Education, Congress, the president, executive branch, and most importantly, which didn't happen when they created the existing disaster, these borrowers, the people who are going to be stuck with this financial aid model, the people have got to be consulted, and they should all meet and do what Congress does and do what affected stakeholders do and meet and come up with and deploy a brand new, shiny, from scratch funding model. One that maximizes people getting college degrees, hopefully in the shortest amount of time and at high quality, at a minimum of cost. Right now, the federal student loan program is optimized to maximize revenue, maximize the amount of time students have to spend in school. Quality has gone down the drain, out the window, particularly for some of the lower brow schools, these sort of fly-by-night for-profit colleges, and many of the nonprofits as well. Don't be mistaken. The nonprofits and the for-profits, they're all terrible. All the colleges have to be put on a diet for 2 years, and we need to replace the federal student loan program with something that actually works, that works for the people, that works for the taxpayers, and that's it. Now, what? And as I said, I'm pretty agnostic as to what higher education funding model should replace the existing one. I will only say that if there is to be any student loans going forward, at a minimum, these loans must have all the same consumer protections that all other loans have. That means bankruptcy rights. That means statutes of limitations, first and foremost. Should also mean truth in lending, fair debt collection practices, all that. All the protections that credit cards have, or gambling debt, or you name it. Every protection that every other loan in this country has, student loans must have those protections. Frankly, I don't think the government, and by the way, originally when the current catastrophe was rolled out in 1965 by a Congress with good intentions and a President LBJ said that the loans would be free of interest. I think that if there is to be student loans going forward, and frankly, I honestly don't think there probably should be, but if there are going to be federal student loans going forward, they should be free of interest, or at least as close to free of interest as you can possibly get them. Maybe no more than like the 10-year Treasury bond rate or something like that. Got to be nearly or completely free of interest. I would say free of interest. There's no good reason for the government to be making a profit off of this, off of educating the citizens. And this is probably the next bullet point is probably the most important one. Congress, because we're replacing the current disaster with something better is very important, has to be done. But the 800-pound gorilla that is staring us in the face right now is what to do with the existing loans. Honestly, if I were president, I would simply cancel them, every nickel of federally owned student loans. But the president cannot cancel all student loans. There's a lot of loans, legacy loans out there that are not owned by the federal government. They can't just be canceled. And it's more complicated than what I just said. But trust me when I tell you that I've thought very long, hard, and carefully about this. And the second bullet point is absolutely critical. It's probably the most important bullet point that I have for you out of like 4. Congress must repeal 11 U.S. Code 523A8. This is the one line of code that makes student loans different from all other loans in bankruptcy proceedings. There was never a good reason to remove this right, which the founding fathers called for in the Constitution, ahead of the power to declare war and raise an army. And there's absolutely no excuse for not returning this most fundamental protection that the founders called for, ahead of every right enumerated in the Bill of Rights as well, I might add. We got to get our bankruptcy rights back, folks. We've got to get the leverage of bankruptcy returned. Now, until Congress does that, the president, in the meantime, must direct the Department of Education and its contractors like ECMC to stop opposing student loan borrowers in bankruptcy court. So in other words, the way bankruptcy works for student loans today is you have to prove something called undue hardship. It is a, for all intents and purposes, impossible criterion to prove. You got to prove that you tried to pay, you can't pay now, you will never be able to pay. Well, you can never prove that third thing. It's just impossible to prove. So, so the way it works out logistically in bankruptcy court is this undue hardship keeps everyone from getting a discharge. The president can tell the Department of Education and its contractors to stop opposing student loan borrowers on these undue hardship claims in bankruptcy court tomorrow. He has got to do that. It's what we were expecting from them, and what, quite frankly, James Cavall and even Joe Biden's campaign manager assured me that they would very seriously consider. And this new bankruptcy process that we got last year, that's what I was hoping that would be, but it was not that. It was a fake. It was a gimmick. It was a head fake. They've got to scrap the new bankruptcy process that they rolled out last year. It's meaningless. And instead, they've got to do what I was expecting them to do in the first place, which is stop opposing student loan borrowers in bankruptcy court. That way, student loans will be treated the same as all other loans in bankruptcy proceedings, assuming that the bankruptcy judges don't all of a sudden decide to start micromanaging the case or whatever. So that's absolutely critical as a real logistical matter, as a matter of just nuts and bolts solving this problem. So they've got to return bankruptcy protections to the loans. I'm going out on a bit of a limb with this next point, but honestly, I think it is more than fair that the colleges collectively should be forced to reimburse the taxpayer for discharged loans, at least to some extent. I'm saying up to half of the original amount that was borrowed, which is a tiny fraction of the amount that's discharged, by the way, because of interest and penalties and fees and all the other things get added on to loans before they wind up in bankruptcy. But I think that is very fair. I think it's probably not super fair to make the poorest colleges shoulder the same burden that the wealthiest colleges would have to share, just because people who go to the fly-by-night, shitty, inexpensive colleges, not that all inexpensive colleges are shitty, but that's kind of the way that goes. I think it'd be kind of unfair to make the poorer colleges, to force them out of business because such a large percentage of their people wind up filing for bankruptcy. And by the way, I don't think a very large percentage of people will end up filing for bankruptcy, guys. I think that with the leverage of bankruptcy in place, it will force the Department of Education to run its income-driven repayment plans in such a way as to make sure that most people make it through, rather than the overwhelming majority of people getting disqualified out of the programs. I think a universe of very good things will happen that will offer far more attractive alternatives to bankruptcy to beleaguered student loan borrowers. But nonetheless, the colleges should be put on the hook. And whatever the discharge rate winds up being, the colleges should be compelled to take some financial responsibility in that, as sort of a slap on the wrist for doing a shitty job and overcharging their students. So I think the colleges should have to share in that responsibility in a fair way, where the Harvards and the Yales and the Princetons and the Stanfords and the colleges with massive endowments would have to pay more of that penalty than the poorer colleges. And we can debate about what the details of that should look like. And finally, and this is most important, the president must be prepared. Unlike Joe Biden, the last cancellation gimmick that we saw him foist on us, probably designed to fail, in my humble opinion. The president has got to be prepared to invoke Section 1082 of the Higher Education Act, which gives the secretary and the president very broad, very unambiguous, I would say legally bulletproof authority to cancel, waive, compromise, release every penny. In other words, cancel every penny of federally owned student loan debt. The president had better be ready to invoke that power. Maybe he won't cancel all the loans. Maybe he won't need to. Maybe 15% of the people are able to successfully pay and they're just hunky-dory and everything's fine. But in order, and this depends on the number of bankruptcies that ultimately we wind up seeing. If it winds up being really, really, really high and people start, we see a wave of bankruptcy filings that is just outrageous, then yeah, the president is going to have to cancel very broad swaths of this debt. Maybe they'll have to do individual workouts with borrowers. So maybe this borrower gets an 80% write-off, this borrower gets 100% write-off. Whatever that winds up looking like, I don't know. But I do know that the president has got to be ready to invoke that power. Quite frankly, if it was me, I would cancel every nickel of federally owned student loan debt. I would throw this failed U.S. policy experiment onto the scrap heap. And I would give the Department of Education and Congress and the colleges and most importantly, the people, the citizens, the affected citizenry, marching orders to huddle and come up with something that works to replace the federal student loan program. So those are my thoughts. Maybe you have your own. I'm sorry, I've already gone on way too long tonight. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to your comments. And I do apologize for that, guys. I try to read comments aloud on air on a nightly basis, but in keeping our live streams to 20 minutes, it becomes really difficult. So I do apologize. I see we have just a few comments. Maybe I'll read them just quickly. Gordon Wayne Watts says, "Hey, Vanjie and Alan Collins, I was 8:30 late. Did I miss anything?" Well, watch the live stream, Gordon, and you'll see what you missed. Vanjie and Rue says, "Truth is our main course." Yes, exactly. And by the way, guys, these loans get turned back on October 1st, and we, the borrowers, are going to be the main course at the Thanksgiving dinner for the student debt collection industry if we don't get our shit together and we don't, at a minimum, get bankruptcy rights returned to these loans. The loans will be turned back on October 1st, and barring a miracle, we will not have our constitutional bankruptcy rights back, guys. Our pants are going to be down. Our ass is going to be up in the air. Pardon my, I know that's crude, but we are going to be over a barrel. And the student loan sharks out there would like nothing better than to feast on our legally vulnerable and unprotected asses. So we got to fight, guys. And this is your fight. You can't count on Vanjie and Gordon and other people on our group, the fierce warriors on our group, to carry your weight for you. You got to step up and do that thing I said at the very top of the broadcast. Go to our website and do our daily actions. Here, I'll click it in here real quick. You can also find our daily actions right there. You can find them from the website, find them there. So I'm sorry, guys. I've gone way over tonight. My final point for tonight is I still have to ask for donations, guys. I really suck at doing this, but I have to do it. Currently, I think we need 10 people to donate $20 or more, or is it like 8 people? We've got a little bit of fundraising left to go for this week. And thank you, Vanjie, by the way, for a very fantastic donation that completely pulled our ass out of the fire this week, I have to say. Thank you. And everyone else too. Amy, Philip, many other people. Thank you. We still need around 8 people to donate $20. There's a special thing that I want to do. I want to try to pay money to Twitter, to X, to Elon Musk, if you will. I want to try doing an ad buy. We've never done it before on Twitter. I want to try it. So I'm trying to raise an extra $100 just to see what sort of mileage we actually get with promoting a tweet, a post on Twitter or X or whatever it's being called these days. So just please donate, guys. Here, let me dial in that link for you. As I said, fundraising is always just extraordinarily difficult for us, guys. And so if you appreciate this group, all that we've done, and by the way, we would not be talking about student loan cancellation by executive order, but for this group. We launched that whole concept into the public conversation. Believe it or not, it's true. We did. We would not be talking about bankruptcy legislation, either past, present, or future, but for the activities of this group. We are way more important than we appear to be, and that's true. So if you want this group to not disappear, and that's also a very true and present danger for us, just please donate so I can shut up about it and we can concentrate on the fight, because the fight is going to be getting very, very difficult for all of us who remain. Particularly if you recently got your loans canceled, I would hope that you would remember us and donate something just because, right? Like, don't pull the ladder up behind you, and don't forget about the 98% of everyone who didn't get that loan cancellation and who are going to be on the chopping block come October 1st. Just please donate so I can shut up about it. So, okay, guys, I'll see y'all tomorrow. I hope you're enthused. I hope more than anything that you will get to the habit of doing our daily actions every day from here on out, from here to the end of the year, at least. And I will just leave you with that, and I will wish you all a good evening. Good luck, Godspeed, doing our daily actions, and God bless everyone. I'll see you tomorrow.